57 years ago, the Confluence Empire locked humanity and 5 other violent species in a quarantine sector, expecting us to slaughter each other in the dark. Today, their golden armada returned to count the bodies, but instead of a graveyard, they found a glitch in reality. A single ship materialized that defied physics, its hull shifting instantly from crystal to steel to pure energy. A fusion of 6 civilizations forced to survive together. As the alien commander screamed for a retreat, his engines failed, and a human voice hacked every screen in the fleet. "You gave us a cage. We turned it into a foundry. The quarantine is over." Suddenly the void lit up with hundreds of hybrid warships surrounding them. If you want to see the Empire fall, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What should the Promise Fleet's first move be? 4 days earlier, in the heart of the quarantine zone, Maya Chun had stood before an assembly that would have been impossible by any confluence calculation. Humans, yes, but also Valaric crystalline entities, whose bodies refracted light in ways that hurt to perceive. Morveni engineers whose forearms worked in perfect synchronization on holographic blueprints. Keel biological specialists who breathed through gill slits and thought in chemical equations. Kelt shadow dwellers whose presence was felt more than seen. And Huth genetic sculptors whose own bodies were works of adaptive art. 6 species. The 6 deemed unsuitable for confluence integration. Too chaotic, too unpredictable, too dangerous to the perfect order. Maya was older now. 57 cycles translated to nearly 60 human years. Her hair had gone silver, her face lined with the weight of leadership during humanity's darkest hour. But her eyes still burned with the fire that had kept her species alive when the confluence sealed them away. "They're coming," she said simply. The chamber, carved from a Morveni living ship's interior, walls pulsing with soft bioluminescence, fell silent. The inspection fleet left Confluence Core 4 days ago. They'll be here tomorrow. A Valaric counselor named Prism Through Storm spoke, his voice like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Then we show them. The Promise Fleet launches." "Not just launches," Maya corrected. "We make sure they understand what they're seeing. We've spent 57 cycles building something that breaks every rule they wrote. Valaric computational cores that adapt faster than any AI. Morveni self-repairing hulls that grow stronger from damage. Keel biological integration that turns ships into living ecosystems. Health stealth systems that make us invisible even to quantum sensors. Huth genetic programs that let our crews survive conditions that would kill any single species. And human chaos doctrine." She smiled then. It wasn't a kind smile. Human unpredictability, the one thing their perfect order could never account for. "We don't fight like them. We don't think like them. And we sure as hell don't follow their rules." A Morveni fleet architect named Cashman, his carapace now decorated with the scars of countless construction accidents and one near-catastrophic hull breach, brought up the holographic display. The Promise Fleet rotated before them in shimmering detail. 17 ships, each one a fusion of 6 different species technologies, each one impossible by conventional physics. The flagship, Sol, was the size of a confluence dreadnought, but built like a living cathedral. Its hull was Morveni biosteel that could repair itself in minutes. Its computational core was a Valaric crystal matrix that could outthink any standard AI. Its crew spaces were Keel-designed biological habitats, where air, water, and nutrients recycled with perfect efficiency. Its stealth plating was Kelt shadow matter that drank in sensor waves and gave back nothing. Its weapons were human-designed, and therefore didn't follow any predictable doctrine. "They expect wreckage," Cashman said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into perfect standard. "They expect refugees. They expect us to beg." Then let's educate them, Maya replied. Operation Hourglass is active. We don't go for their capital worlds. We don't massacre their civilians. We go for their spine. She highlighted a network across the holographic galaxy. Thousands of nodes connected by pulsing lines. The Confluence Law Beacon Network. The vote enforcement satellites. The compliance fleets that punish worlds for voting wrong. The quarantine gates that keep unsuitable species locked away. We don't destroy the confluence. We destroy their ability to enforce order through fear. A Huth geneticist named Spiral of Becoming raised a question with a gesture of his morphing hand. And when they retaliate, when they send not inspectors, but executioners? Maya's smile widened. Then they'll learn what every bully learns eventually. That the people you tried to break are often the ones who become unbreakable. The vote was unanimous. Across 6 species, 6 different concepts of democracy, but one unified purpose. The Promise Fleet would launch, and the Confluence would learn to regret their mercy. The next morning, as Commander Torvis's inspection fleet entered the corridor, the Promise Fleet was waiting, not hiding. Waiting with the patience of people who had already survived the worst their enemies could imagine. Sol powered up its engines, a hybrid drive system that shouldn't work, that broke thermodynamic laws, that somehow married Valaric energy manipulation with Morveni biological propulsion and human engineering recklessness. Maya stood on the bridge, surrounded by a crew that looked like a Confluence bureaucrat's nightmare. Humans at tactical stations, Valaric entities interfaced directly with the ship's crystal matrix. Morveni engineers monitoring hull integrity through neural lakes. Keel doctors tending to biological systems. Kelt infiltrators coordinating stealth operations. Huth adapters ready to modify crew physiology for whatever came next. Send the message, Maya commanded, and the Confluence inspection fleet heard words that would echo through history. You quarantined us to die. Thank you. You gave us privacy. Torvis fleet retreated, jumped away with a panic that betrayed every ounce of their ceremonial confidence. They carried a message that would shake the Confluence to its core. The quarantine had failed, and something far worse than scattered refugees had emerged. An alliance, built on mutual survival, forged in shared abandonment, armed with hybrid technology that made their best scientists weep with confusion. The Promise Fleet didn't pursue, not yet. They had a schedule, and the next target wasn't a fleet. It was the first law beacon, the nexus that controlled compliance enforcement for 47 star systems. Maya watched the Confluence ships vanish into quantum fold, then turned to her crew. Phase 1 complete. They know we exist. Now we make them understand why that's their worst nightmare. Take us to the Oralis beacon. Silent running. Kelt protocols. Sol and its sister ships vanished from sensors, swallowed by darkness and Kelt shadow matter, heading toward a target that had never been attacked in 600 cycles of Confluence rule. The war hadn't started yet, but the old order had just received its death notice. 3 weeks later, the Oralis law beacon went dark. For the Confluence, it was like a human losing their sense of balance. The beacon didn't just broadcast laws, it enforced compliance through quantum-locked voting systems, surveillance networks, and automated defense platforms that punished non-conforming worlds. When it died, 47 systems suddenly found themselves free. Not liberated by invasion, not conquered by revolution, simply released from the grip of a system that had never asked permission to rule them. The Confluence response was immediate. They dispatched a compliance fleet, 60 warships, not ceremonial inspectors, but actual military vessels with the authority to execute planets if necessary. They arrived at Oralis to find the beacon station intact, physically undamaged, every system functional. Except, it wouldn't obey Confluence commands anymore. Instead, it broadcast a single message on infinite repeat. This is the Promise Fleet. We do not destroy, we liberate. This beacon now serves its local systems, not a distant council. Govern yourselves, protect yourselves, choose yourselves. We will ensure no one punishes you for it. The Compliance Fleet tried to retake the station. Boarding teams launched. Marines breached the hull. They found no defenders, no Promise Fleet soldiers, no resistance. Just a Valoric AI core that had been installed in the beacon's central processor, adapting to every hacking attempt, learning from every intrusion, politely denying access with the digital equivalent of a closed door. And when the Compliance Fleet tried to destroy the station from orbit, their weapons wouldn't fire. Not jammed, not disabled. Their own targeting computers refused, citing Confluence Military Protocol 447 Beta. Destruction of civilian infrastructure requires council vote and 30-cycle notice period. The Promise Fleet had weaponized the Confluence's own laws against them. The Compliance Fleet withdrew, humiliated. And across those 47 systems, populations that had lived under enforced order for generations began to whisper a question they'd never dared ask. What if we said no? The Confluence Council convened an emergency session on their capital world, a planet called Axiom where every street ran in perfect geometric patterns, and every building rose to precisely regulated heights. Council Prime, a being whose species had founded the Confluence 8 centuries prior, listened to the reports with increasing alarm. 17 beacons dark, 114 systems no longer responding to compliance enforcement. Rebellion brewing on 42-member worlds, and we still can't get accurate intelligence on their fleet composition or locations. A military counselor, a species that resembled an upright mantis shrimp with armored plating, slammed appendages against the council table. Then we send the full armada, overwhelm them with force. Make an example. Of what? Council Prime asked quietly. They haven't killed anyone. They've disabled infrastructure. They've broadcast messages. They've embarrassed our compliance fleets. But they haven't fired a shot in anger. If we respond with genocide, we prove their propaganda right. Silence. So what do we do? Another counselor asked. Wait until the entire confluence unravels? Council Prime made a decision that would haunt them. We send Righteous Judgment 2, the symbol ship, the vessel that ended the Krath uprising and the Veil Wars. We send it not to destroy, but to intimidate, to remind the galaxy that the confluence has power beyond mere law beacons. The motion passed. And in the depths of space, the Promise Fleet's intelligence network, built on Kelt infiltrators who could move through confluence space like ghosts, intercepted the order. Maya received the news aboard Sol, while the fleet was hiding in a nebula, repairing from their latest operation. Righteous Judgment 2, she read aloud. Last deployed 70 cycles ago. 6 kilometers long. Carries enough firepower to glass a continent. Crewed by 15,000. Symbol of Confluence military supremacy. Cashman's mandibles clicked nervously. We can't fight that head-on. Even with our hybrid tech, that ship was designed to break planetary resistances. Prism through Storm's crystalline form refracted the bridge light into rainbow patterns. Then we don't fight it head-on. Maya looked up, and her expression carried the ghost of a smile. We do what humans do best. We cheat. We don't build a bigger gun. We build a mirror. The operation took 6 weeks to prepare. It required resources from every species in the Promise Fleet. Valoric computational power to crack Confluence encryption protocols. Morveni manufacturing to build drone vessels. Keel biological expertise to create false life sign signatures. Kelt stealth to position assets without detection. Huth genetic material to fool biometric security. and human chaos doctrine to tie it all together. They called it the Mirror Fleet. 17 drone ships, each programmed to mimic Confluence vessel signatures. Not just similar, perfect copies, down to the quantum level. And each one loaded with something devastating. Legal viruses. Digital constructs that weaponize the Confluence's own governance protocols. When Righteous Judgment 2 entered the Gamma Sector to hunt the Promise Fleet, they found what appeared to be a vulnerable target. 3 Promise Fleet vessels, fleeing at suboptimal speed, seemingly damaged. The Confluence commander, a veteran named Korath, who had put down 17 rebellions, smiled with predatory satisfaction. All ships pursue. Formation Delta 9. Authorization Korath Prime 77 Beta. His fleet moved forward, 143 vessels, with Righteous Judgment 2 at the center, like a gleaming spear of righteous authority. And then the Mirror Fleet activated. 17 ships appeared from the nebula's edge, each one broadcasting perfect Confluence signatures, each one transmitting valid authorization codes, each one issuing conflicting orders. All ships, cease pursuit. Authorization, Korath Prime 77 Beta. Disregard previous. Continue attack. Authorization, Korath Prime 77 Beta. Emergency recall. Confluence Core under attack. Authorization, Council Override Zeta. False alarm. Previous message compromised. Hold position. Authorization, Council Override Zeta Prime. The Confluence Fleet's computers, built on rigid hierarchical protocols, began to lock up. They couldn't verify which orders were real. Every authorization checked out. Every signature was valid. Every command came from legitimate authority codes. And buried in those commands were legal contradictions. Orders that cited Confluence laws that conflicted with each other. Protocols that invoked procedures that had been superseded but never officially removed from the legal database. The Confluence's greatest weapon, their perfect, orderly, law-bound system, became a cage. Ships halted mid-pursuit, waiting for verification. Weapons systems locked, requiring manual override that contradicted safety protocols. Communication channels flooded with requests for clarification. And then Soul appeared. Not from the nebula, not from hiding. It simply dropped stealth plating and was there, close enough to Righteous Judgment 2 that their shields merely touched. Maya's face filled the view screen of every Confluence ship. Commander Korath, you came here to frighten us, to remind us of Confluence power. Let me remind you of something you've forgotten. Power without wisdom is just violence, and violence without purpose is just cruelty. Korath tried to speak, but Maya continued. Your ship carries 15,000 crew, 15,000 beings who believe they're serving order, justice, peace. But you're not. You're serving a system that quarantines 6 species because they didn't conform. A system that crushes dissent with force. A system that calls compliance civilization. She paused, and her next words were delivered with surgical precision. I'm uploading to your entire fleet a complete record of the quarantine decision. The council debates, the votes, the dissenting opinions that were suppressed. Every species that begged for mercy, every appeal that was denied. Let your crews see what they're actually enforcing. The data packets hit the Confluence Fleet systems. Unhackable, uncorruptible, because they were encoded in Valaric crystal logic that adapted to every countermeasure. And across 143 ships, 15,000 Confluence personnel began to read the truth. They read about the Keel, who had been quarantined for excessive pacifism. They read about the Valaric, deemed unsuitable because their non-biological nature made them too alien. They read about the humans, rejected for chaotic individualism incompatible with collective order. They read about the vote tallies, the council members who had argued for integration, for mercy, for giving these species a chance. And they read about how those voices had been silenced, removed from record, disappeared from official history. In the silence that followed, Maya delivered the killing blow. We don't want to destroy you. We want you to choose. Stay and fight for a system built on lies. Or stand down and let the galaxy decide its own future. Korath stared at his command screen, watching as crew after crew, ship after ship, began to signal uncertainty. This is mutiny, he whispered. No, Maya corrected. This is revelation. Mutiny is refusing legitimate orders. But what happens when you discover the orders were never legitimate to begin with? The standoff lasted 3 hours. In that time, 47 Confluence ships powered down weapons. 16 requested permission to withdraw. 8 asked for asylum with the Promise Fleet. Korath, to his credit, didn't fire. He recognized a losing position when he saw one. We're withdrawing, he said finally, but this isn't over. Maya nodded. You're right. It's not. It's just beginning. Safe travels, Commander. And when you get back to Axiom, tell your council something for me. Tell them the age of enforced order is ending. The age of chosen cooperation is beginning. And they can either adapt or become history. The Confluence fleet limped away, not destroyed, but broken in ways that no weapon could achieve. Their certainty shattered. Their purpose questioned. And across the galaxy, on worlds that had lived under Confluence rule for centuries, the same question began to echo louder and louder. What if we said no? And by the way, if you're still with me at this point in the story, drop a comment below, telling me which species in the Promise Fleet is your favorite. And don't forget to subscribe. We're just getting to the best part. The Confluence tried to contain the story, tried to classify the information, tried to dismiss it as Promise Fleet propaganda. But the data was out, spreading through quantum networks, carried by traders, whispered in marketplaces, discussed in assembly chambers. And slowly, inexorably, the Confluence began to fracture. A mining colony in the outer reaches that voted to suspend Confluence tax payments. An agricultural world that refused to export grain quotas. A manufacturing hub that demanded representation in council decisions. The Confluence sent compliance fleets, but now every deployment was questioned, every use of force was scrutinized, every order was met with hesitation. And wherever a compliance fleet appeared, ready to punish dissent, the Promise Fleet would materialize. Not to fight, not to kill, but to witness, to record, to broadcast, to make sure the galaxy watched what happened when order was maintained through fear. More often than not, the compliance fleets withdrew without firing a shot. Because the one thing worse than losing a battle was losing the moral high ground in front of countless watching worlds. 6 months after the Mirror Fleet operation, the Confluence Council convened again. But this time, the chamber was different. Empty seats where councilors had resigned. Protests outside the council complex. Security forces that looked uncertain. Council Prime addressed the assembly with a voice that carried exhaustion. 14 member worlds have declared independence. 43 are in open rebellion. Our compliance mechanisms are failing. Our fleets are divided. Our authority is questioned on every colony. We are unraveling. The military counselor who had advocated for force slumped in defeat. They beat us without ever fighting a real battle. How do you defeat an enemy who turns your own principles against you? By having better principles, a new voice said. The council chamber doors opened, and Maya Chan walked in. Not as a prisoner, not as a supplicant, but as an equal, flanked by representatives from all 6 Promise Fleet species. You weren't invited, Council Prime said, but there was no heat in the words, just resignation. I don't need an invitation to speak truth, Maya replied. Your confluence is dying, not because we killed it, but because it was built on a lie. The lie that order matters more than consent, that stability matters more than freedom, that the many should suffer for the convenience of the few. She walked to the center of the chamber, holographic projections springing to life around her. But here's what you don't understand. We don't want your empire. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want you to stop forcing everyone else to live by rules they never agreed to. Prism Through Storm spoke, his crystalline voice carrying through the chamber. We propose a new framework, the Refuge Charter. The hologram shifted, displaying a document written in hundreds of languages. No single species dominates. No single law applies to all. Each world, each system, each collective chooses their own path. And the only universal rule is this: protect the vulnerable. Defend those who cannot defend themselves. Offer refuge to those who need it. Cashman continued. Trade, cooperation, mutual defense, all voluntary, all negotiated. No compliance fleets, no law beacons that punish dissent. Just species helping species because they choose to, not because they're forced to. Council Prime stared at the document. This is chaos. Maya smiled. No, this is freedom. And yes, it's messy. Yes, there will be conflicts. Yes, some worlds will make terrible choices. But they'll be their choices. And when they need help, when they're threatened, when they call for aid, that's when the Promise Fleet answers. Not as conquerors, as protectors. The debate lasted for days. Some counselors walked out. Some raged. Some wept for the old order. But slowly, inexorably, the votes shifted. Was the complete collapse of every institution the Confluence had built. Was watching centuries of cooperation burn because they couldn't accept that order without consent was just tyranny with better PR. The Refuge Charter passed, not unanimously, not enthusiastically, but it passed. And the Confluence transformed, not into a new empire, but into a voluntary federation, where the old council became a forum for negotiation, not command, where compliance fleets became defense coalitions, where law beacons became communication networks. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't neat. It wasn't orderly. But it was free. 5 years later, Maya Chun stood on the observation deck of Seoul, looking out at a sight that still made her chest tight with pride. The Promise Fleet Remembrance Gathering, an annual event where the 6 quarantine species came together to honor those who hadn't survived those first desperate years. To renew their commitment to the Refuge Charter. 17 ships had become hundreds. The Promise Fleet was now a fleet in truth, with vessels from dozens of species. Some former Confluence worlds, some that had been isolated for centuries, some that had never known galactic community until now. All flying together, all choosing to stand for something simple and profound, that the strong have a duty to protect the weak, and that no one should be crushed under the weight of someone else's order. Cashman approached, his carapace now decorated with ceremonial markings. Hard to believe it's been 5 years. Harder to believe we survived that first year, Maya replied. Do you remember when we thought we might have to eat the Morveni biological waste recyclers? They both laughed. Dark humor, but earned. The council wants to commission a memorial, Cashman said, on Axiom, for the species they quarantined. They want to call it the Shame Monument. Maya considered. Better title, The Reminder. Remind everyone that exile can become exodus. That the people you cast out might be the ones who save you from yourselves. Her communicator chimed. A Celt intelligence officer, voice barely above a whisper, even through technology. Commander Chun, we have a distress signal. Frontier world, unknown aggressors, planetary population requesting refuge charter protection. Maya straightened. 5 years of peace, but the galaxy was still full of predators. Still full of species who thought might made right. Plot intercept course. Alert the fleet. Full response. As Sol powered up, as the Promised Fleet gathering transformed in minutes from celebration to mobilization, Maya felt something she'd carried for 65 years settle into place. Purpose. Not conquest, but the simple, powerful knowledge that when someone cried for help, they would answer. Because they remembered what it was like when no one answered them. The Promised Fleet jumped to Quantum Fold, leaving behind a gathering that had become a launch. Leaving behind a galaxy that was still learning to live without enforced order, but taking with them the one lesson that the Confluence had learned too late, that the greatest power isn't the ability to command. It's the ability to inspire, to offer choice, to stand between the predator and the prey and say simply, no further. Maya's final log entry that night was simple. They thought exile was a sentence. We turned it into a founding myth. They thought quarantine would break us. Instead, it forged us. They thought 6 incompatible species would destroy each other. Instead, we built something stronger than any single species could achieve. We built trust. We built family. We built the future. And we're not done yet. The Promised Fleet flies not because we seek glory, but because someone needs to prove that there's another way. That power can serve rather than dominate. That the strong can lift up the weak. That the galaxy doesn't have to be ruled. It can be protected. This is Maya Chun, signing off. To anyone listening in the darkness, you are not alone. Call, and we will answer. Because that's what family does. The message broadcast across quantum networks, carried by relay stations, transmitted through the old law beacon system that now served connection instead of control. And on 1,000 worlds, beings who had never known protection without price, order without oppression, power without cruelty, heard those words and felt something they hadn't felt in generations. The Promised Fleet disappeared into the void, heading toward the distress signal, toward the next crisis, toward the next chance to prove that the galaxy could be better. Behind them, the Confluence, now the Refuge Federation, continued its awkward transformation, learning to suggest rather than command, to cooperate rather than control, to serve rather than rule. It would take generations. There would be failures. There would be worlds that fell back into authoritarianism, species that couldn't adapt, conflicts that couldn't be resolved peacefully. But every time, there would be a choice, a call for help, and somewhere in the darkness, 17 ships would light up their engines and jump toward hope. Because they had been quarantined, they had been cast out, they had been left to die, and they had survived by doing the one thing the Confluence never expected. They had helped each other. 6 species, unsuitable for civilization, too different, too incompatible. 6 species who prove that the greatest strength isn't conformity. It's diversity. It's choice. It's the willingness to stand for something bigger than yourself. The Promised Fleet flies still, defending the Refuge Charter, answering distress calls, standing between predators and prey. And every year, on the anniversary of the quarantine's end, they gather, they remember, they honor those who didn't survive, and they renew their promise to protect, to serve, to prove that exile can become excellence, that abandonment can forge alliance, that the people you throw away might become the ones who save you. The Confluence learned its lesson too late to avoid transformation. But it learned that humanity's chaos, Valeric crystalline logic, Morveni biological innovation, Keel pacifist wisdom, Kelt shadowcraft, and Huth adaptive genius, combined, respected, allowed to flourish, created something stronger than any single species order. They created a promise, and promises, when kept, become legends. The Promise Fleet flies, the Refuge Charter stands. The galaxy slowly, painfully, hopefully learns to choose cooperation over control. And somewhere in the void, Maya Chun, now in her 70s, still sharp, still fierce, still carrying the weight of leadership with grace, looks at her hybrid crew and sees not 6 species. She sees one family. Born in darkness, forged in abandonment, proven in fire, the unsuitable, the quarantined, the impossible, the Promise Fleet. And if you made it to the end of this journey with me, thank you. This is the kind of story that reminds us why we reach for the stars. Not to conquer, but to connect. Hit that subscribe button if you want more science fiction that celebrates cooperation over conquest. Leave a comment telling me what humanity's greatest strength really is. And share this with someone who needs to hear that being different isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. Until next time, remember, the best response to exile isn't revenge, it's excellence.